All right. Good morning. Hello and welcome to our digital discussion as we step into history today on Nikola Tesla, his life, work, and alternating current. My name is Isaac Hunter, and I'm a historian here at Edison and Ford. And for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about Nikola Tesla. All right. So to begin, Nikola Tesla uh, was born in the small town of Smiljan in modern-day Croatia. He was born July 10th, 1856. So that would be about 9 years after Thomas Edison. So he's a little bit younger than Thomas Edison. As you can see from this picture, Smiljan is just across the Adriatic Sea from Italy. And when he was born, it was within the Austrian Empire's military frontier, and so technically he was Austrian according to the time at the time, but ethnically he was Serbian. His family was Serbian. His culture was Serbian. This is an image of Nikola Tesla's house where he was born. As of right now today, it is a small historical spot. You could go there. That's where the statue of Nikola Tesla is. Now, Nikola Tesla was the son of Milutin Tesla and Duka, Milutin's wife. He was the fourth child of five children in total. He had three sisters, Angelica, Milka, and Marika, as well as an older brother named Dane. His older brother, however, passed away in a horse accident when Nikola was a child, and that always kind of stuck with him, watching his older brother pass away. Now, I'm going to get started real quick by saying Nikola Tesla, he did not write down a lot about his life until later in life. Most of what he would tell were just stories about his childhood, his birth, where he came from. A lot of times this was not written down or recorded. And so I will say take everything that I say that Nikola Tesla would say with a little bit of grain of salt, at least until he gets to the United States, because then they actually do start to record a lot of things. But sometimes the stories Nikola Tesla would tell would change a little bit as well. And so, according to family legend, Nikola was born during a thunderstorm. Allegedly, the midwife claimed that this was a bad omen and that Nikola Tesla would be cursed. This was bad. However, his mother, according to Nikola Tesla, his mother Duka would claim that no, this means he would be a child of light, which of course is very fitting if you are familiar with Nikola Tesla, light and electricity. I would say a little bit of both were true in that he was a child of light, but also some people could say his life was cursed, depending on your views on all of that. Now, Nikola Tesla's father, Milutin, was a priest in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and it's actually why the family moved to Smiljan. They came from a smaller other town, and they moved there so he could be the priest for the Church of St. Peter and Paul in Smiljan. This is a picture of the church. It's right across from the house I showed you guys earlier. His maternal uncles were also Eastern Orthodox priests, and so priesthood was very big in the family. And the way that it worked is that Nikola Tesla was expected to follow in his father's footsteps. He too would become a priest in the Eastern Orthodox Church, which would be pretty interesting if that had actually panned out. However, Nikola Tesla was a child prodigy. He had a photographic memory and he could learn multiple languages quite easily. He contributed a lot of this to his mother, who, while she was uneducated, she would actually be able to memorize huge amounts of information, especially on poetry, these big Serbian poems, and she could recall them from memory almost perfectly. So a lot of oral history there, but he attributed that, his photographic memory, to her. And throughout his life, he would claim to see different flashes of light that would come into his head, and these would bring ideas. And so a lot of scholars don't know if this was some sort of developmental issue, if this was based on trauma, possibly from seeing his brother pass away at a young age. We don't know, but what we do know is that Nikola claimed these flashes of light would bring images and ideas. And many times, and I'll continue talking about this a little bit later, but many times these ideas are actually what gave him a lot of his ideas for innovations. And so possibly it just could be that he's thinking of all these things at once, and then they just hit at one big moment, and he builds a picture in his head. We don't know. And here we have a picture of young Nikola Tesla there working. Uh, Unfortunately, though, Nikola Tesla, he was a sickly and weak child. He was constantly bedridden. And so oftentimes he would be stuck at home. But when he's at home, he still has, he can still learn. He can still read. He loved to read. He loved to learn. And ultimately, he would attend a local primary school where he would study German, arithmetic, and religion. And he excelled at these greatly. High school for him was at the Higher Real Gymnasium. It was another nearby town. They would head over there to attend high school, and it would be here where he would first find his lifelong interest on electricity. There would be an electrical demonstration by his physics instructor, and before long, he just fell in love with it. It was this amazing, almost magic to him, and he wanted to figure out how it worked, and what more he could do to learn from it and improve from it. Now, ultimately, he would graduate his 4-year degree in only 3 years. A lot of this he would attribute to his photographic memory. He could actually do a lot of calculus in his head without showing it on paper. In some stories, his teachers accused him of cheating and other students, and so they would have to retest him on his own. And ultimately, he would still get the same score because it would be correct, and so they couldn't prove he was cheating at all. He was just incredibly smart guy. This is a picture of Nikola Tesla in his adolescence, young adult there. Now, unfortunately, after high school, he would contract cholera. He was bedridden for 9 months. He was constantly in and out of being awake and being asleep. And his father was really worried for his health. And people thought Nikola Tesla was going to pass away because of this. And ultimately, his dad was praying to, he's an Eastern Orthodox priest, of course. But this whole time, he's praying and he's talking to Nikola and he's saying, if you can get better, I promise you, you don't have to go to a priest school. You can follow your dreams. I see that you're really into engineering. I will actually send you to an engineering school if you get better. And like a miracle, like a child of light, Nikola Tesla would get better. And ultimately, his father would get some money to send him to an engineering school. However, Nikola Tesla, he survived, but every Austrian Empire-born son was expected to serve in the military after high school. And this is a young Nikola Tesla who was on the verge of death. He is weak, he has lost weight, and he is not in the right headset, the right mental health, the right physical health to actually go and serve in the military. And Nikola's family did actually help him go and hide in the mountains disguised as a hunter for 1 year to avoid that military service. And after 1 year, he would go out, he would still take books with him, he would learn out there in the wilderness. But after 1 year, he would return and he would officially attend college. He attended the Imperial Royal Technical College in Graz. Ironically, one of the reasons he was able to actually afford college was on a military frontier scholarship. And so he was getting money from the Austrian Empire because they were in the military frontier to attend school, even though he had avoided military. So ultimately, though, it panned out for him. He would enroll, and he worked incredibly hard at this college. He loved learning, and he did his best to get the best marks. But ultimately, really to his own detriment. He often would work tirelessly. He skipped meals and sleep many times. And one day he would write home to his dad and say, "Hey, look at how well I did. I got top marks in all my classes." And his dad would say, "I know, because your instructors have messaged me as well. And they told me that you were working yourself to death." And he's like, "You got to focus on your health, Nikola Tesla. He's been sick his whole life." He's like, "You really got to focus on that, but also school." And Nikola Tesla's like, "All right, I'll do a little bit better." Now, ultimately, Tesla, he at school would witness a presentation of alternating current. And this is really where his life takes a drastic turn. because the way alternating current had worked before, it has been around a long time. Michael Faraday worked on it as well, alternating current, 1830s really. And so there was a machine kind of like this. This is a little hand crank alternating current, and you can cause current by cranking it. But it was very volatile. That was the thing about alternating current, is that you couldn't really control how powerful and how dangerous it was at the time, and it caused sparks. It used brushes to kind of brush against and cause these sparks. And he was looking at that. He was like, I could make a better version of that. I could improve that. And before you know it, his teacher's like, no way, this is top of the line science. You can't make a better, this is your first day looking at this. You can't improve this. Other scientists have tried. And ultimately, Nikola Tesla would get laughed at by not just his professor, but also his fellow peers, his students. But he always held on to that idea of proving alternating current, because he saw it, like light, as like his flashes of light. He was like, I could improve this easily. Now, after that, unfortunately, after his second year of school, the scholarship was canceled. And so Nikola Tesla was not able to continue paying for classes. And so one of the things he would do was he would start gambling. He would gamble to pay for classes, and he wasn't too good at different card games and other things, but he was exceptionally well at playing billiards or table pool. I'm sure being able to do calculus in your head, you can find, perfect shots and all that. And gambling, he would make enough money to pay for classes his third year. However, he got addicted to gambling. A cruel turn of fate. He would skip the classes that he just paid for. He would not do his homework. He would not do this work, and instead he would just go out and gamble. Uh, Unfortunately and ironically, really, he would actually end up dropping out his third year. He failed out of his classes. He flunked. And so instead of trying again to go back, he would skip town, and he would head across the border into Slovenia to a little town called Maribor. Or actually, I'd say a city called Maribor. This is an image of it today. And he would just gamble, and he would do what he could to survive over there. And he did not contact his family for a whole year. And ultimately, after a year, his dad would track him down. Um, Nikola Tesla's dad tried Milutin. He tried to attempt to convince Nikola Tesla to come home. Like, you have to come home. You gotta, don't just gamble your life away. And Nikola Tesla's like, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm sorry, you can't control me. And he heads out. And then, unfortunately, or fortunately, possibly, he was deported from Slovenia because he didn't have a residency permit. And so he gets kicked back home. He goes home just to find out that his dad is on his deathbed. He is the one that's now sick in bed. And unfortunately, his father would pass away the following month, a month or two later, and he would be heartbroken. Nikola Tesla. Now, Nikola Tesla's uncles, I have two images of them right here. One is his mother's brother, and one's his dad's brother. Uh, they would actually come together and say, listen, we know how smart you are, nephew of ours, and so we're going to put forward money so that you could go to school again. You can go to another university, a different one from last time, but we're going to give you that money. And so they did raise funds, and they did give him the money to go to the Charles Ferdinand University in Prague. Now, this is one of those moments I say take with a grain of salt, because many different times Nikola Tesla would say that he attended the Charles Ferdinand University in Prague. Sometimes he said he graduated from the Ferdinand University in Prague. However, there aren't any records of him actually attending. There aren't any of him in classes. The work's not there. The record's not there. And so a lot of times the story has been chopped up to maybe he was too late. He showed up too late to actually attend the classes. And ultimately, he just sought work elsewhere. And he took the money that his uncles raised for him and basically tried to use it to make a living. And so he said he went here sometimes. He did not ultimately, has no record of going. He goes over to Hungary to work at the Budapest Telephone Exchange. So here's a picture of a telephone exchange. He served as a chief electrician, and the Budapest Telephone Exchange was created by a guy named Tivadar Puskis, and forgive my pronunciation. he was the creator of the company and of the first telephone exchange as well. And Tivadar actually created the telephone exchange based on Thomas Edison's patents. He based it on his work because it was at the same time that Alexander Graham Bell was working on one as well. Instead, this guy went with Edison's. And after working there for a while, he got pretty, he worked well with Tivadar. That before you know it, Tivadar would actually find Tesla a job in Paris at the Edison Continental Company. And so before long, he is working at one of Thomas Edison's companies over in Europe. In 1882 in Paris, he would be as installing incandescent lighting throughout the city. That's what Thomas Edison worked on, incandescent lighting using direct current. During this time, he gained a lot of practice in electrical engineering, but at the same time, he would continue that work on alternating current that he had seen back in college. It was actually during one of these moments where Nikola Tesla was walking around in a park, and he had one of those flashes of light, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I could actually." He could see the actual creation of the alternating motor that he could create, and so he drew a line of it in the sand, kind of designed it on the sand there. He had a friend with him at the same time too, and he just had this eureka moment. And ultimately, it would be when he was over in Paris that he would construct his first induction motor. Thinking about alternating current, of course, and so that was really his little start there on AC, was actually working with DC. Management would take notice of his abilities at the Edison Continental Company, and before long, a guy named Charles Batchelor, who was overseeing the Paris company, this is the gentleman right here, would head back to the United States, where he worked for Thomas Edison. He was one of his partners and really one of his right-hand men, and he would invite that Tesla to come to the United States as well. He said, "You got good work, you'd be good over in the United States." And 2 years after he started working there, 1884, Tesla would immigrate to the United States. Funny enough, when he was actually on his way through immigration services, they incorrectly registered him as being from Sweden, as Swedish. And that's just a little fun fact for you there. Now, ultimately, Nikola Tesla, he would get to America, and I say here, he got to work immediately, literally. According to Nikola Tesla, he gets off the train or off the boat, and he's walking down the street. He's going to try and make his way to the Edison company. He specifically worked at the Edison Machine Works right there. And he's on his way there, and according to Tesla, he would actually stop and work on two different generators just on his way there. The first one is it's on a boat called the SS Oregon, and he goes in and they're having trouble. They're like, "Hey, we're having trouble with the generator, it's not working." And he goes in and he rolls his sleeves up and he actually does fix it for them. And they do have records in the SS Oregon saying that this young man did come and fix their generator. And so he worked for them there, the SS Oregon. And the second one was at this small like machine shop. He's also walking, they're having trouble, he walks in, he fixes it, and Tesla says that company offered him a job there on the spot. And ultimately, though, Tesla would say, "No, I'm going to go work for Thomas Edison instead." And so he finally makes his way to Thomas Edison, and it is the middle of the night, and Thomas Edison's still up because he also was one to not go to sleep, skip that for work. And according to the story, is that Thomas Edison and Charles Batchelor were waiting for him, and Tesla shows up, and Edison says, "At last, our Parisian has arrived," because Tesla was working in Paris. And they're like, "What took you so long?" And Tesla's like, "I was working on two generators on the way here." And he had he was dirty, his clothes were scuffed, he had oil on him, etc. And he said that Edison looked over, said something to Charles Batchelor and started walking away with him. And then Tesla says that Edison said, "We found ourselves a good one," is what he supposedly he said. So I don't know the truth of that, since it was from his own mouth, but you never know. It sounded like they'd get off on good terms. Ultimately, Nikola Tesla would work not directly under Thomas Edison. He worked under a separate manager. You got to remember at this time, Thomas Edison is he's a business owner. He has multiple companies, multiple businesses, and it would be he was kind of overseeing all of them, and so they had different managers, different supervisors that oversaw different workers. And Tesla would work at the Edison Machine Works under a different manager for a total of 6 months, so a very short time, to be honest. There would be a small falling out. During his time there, he worked on arc lighting. That was a big thing. He was working on arc lighting and other electrical engineering projects. But there is this debacle that Nikola Tesla has talked about, that essentially a manager came up and was like, "Hey, we need to find improvements to these dynamos." And allegedly that manager said, if anyone can find these improvements, I will give them $50,000, which with inflation would be over $1 million today. So a hefty sum of money. And so Nikola Tesla got to work right away. And ultimately, he would come up with 24 improvements to these different machines, these different innovations to dynamo generators, as well as other technology that would work together. And he goes up to that manager and he plops it all in front of him and says, "All right, here are your improvements. I'll take my money now." And the manager supposedly was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, the money, you promised the money." And he says, "We don't have $50,000 to give you. That was just a little bit of American humor." And Nikola Tesla was not happy to hear that, because not only did he come up with a number of really good improvements, but he wasn't getting any of the money he was promised. Now, he's told that story many times, and in some stories, it would say he was just a manager. In different retellings, the story is that it's Thomas Edison himself that said that to Nikola Tesla. But most sources say that it was not Thomas Edison. It was just the manager over him, his supervisor. But nonetheless, Nikola Tesla was hurt from this and insulted. And before long, he would leave the company. Now, Tesla would go out on his own. He would continue his work on different lighting systems. And in 1886, he would start the Tesla Electric Light and Manufacturing Co. Now, this would be a company that he joined with two other partners on. And unfortunately, it seemed that these men were really just trying to take advantage of Nikola Tesla's brilliance. Tesla worked on this stuff for this company, but ultimately, it started to lose money and they went bankrupt. And Tesla actually had to he had to sell his shares as well as his patents in the company to make the money back. And so any of the patents that he patented for that company, he had to sell. And so he didn't make money from that either. And before long, he would actually just have to dig ditches to survive. He was literally digging telegraph wires, telephone wires, different electrical wires, and he's wearing his full silk suits. And other people thought that was really odd. He was a very clean guy, but he was getting down and dirty and digging essentially trenches. But he never gave up on alternating current. That was still at the back of his head. It was still latching on there. And while he was kind of finding odd jobs to survive here and there, he was writing. He was working on different currents and transformers, different machines that could help produce alternating current and make it safer. And he writes a few articles and he produces them, he publishes them in other people's magazines. And they are noticed by a gentleman named George Westinghouse Jr. So that's this guy right here with this great mustache. George Westinghouse Jr. Was also a businessman and inventor like Thomas Edison. He owned many companies. He worked initially on a lot of air brake systems for trains. He was an incredibly brilliant guy, also very wealthy. But he worked kind of like Thomas Edison, except for Thomas Edison would hire people for the company, and then everyone would work under him, and then he would patent those. George Westinghouse oftentimes would buy other people's patents for his company. But either way, both men are utilizing other people's, they're big corporations. They work with other people. And George Westinghouse noticed Tesla's work. And this was during a time when Westinghouse was working on alternating current. He initially actually tried to use DC current to kind of match with Thomas Edison. When he started seeing Europeans, he had sent a guy to Europe who was working on, and he saw that they were working on alternating current. And of course, Thomas did not invent direct current, and Tesla did not invent AC, alternating current. Those had both been around for a while. Multiple companies and inventors worked on these different things. But George Westinghouse was starting to butt heads with Thomas Edison as they were both trying to basically counter each other's companies, trying like to get higher and higher. And Tesla would be the saving grace to Westinghouse and his company. And once he joined, this would really be the start of the War of the Currents, which, if you've ever heard about, was this large, essentially battle in the 1880s between alternating current and direct current, where Edison was really heading direct current. He thought that should be the norm for lighting houses and businesses and cities, and Westinghouse and many other people working on alternating current because they saw that that was more profitable and also more powerful, and so you could light up a larger amount of buildings, larger amount of city with alternating current generators. Just the one problem was alternating current was dangerous. It was incredibly dangerous. It was very powerful. It's why we can't touch power lines today. If you touch a power line, you're going to get electrocuted. Now, it was volatile. That was the problem too. It had its ups and it had its downs. Incredibly dangerous. You couldn't really control that. And Thomas Edison, he had all the reason to work on DC because he had incandescent lighting that he did not want to shoot too much electricity through, or those would burn out quickly. So DC was better for his incandescent bulbs, as well as it was safer to the public. You could touch an open line of direct current and you would just get a shock, but you wouldn't, get zapped and fall over. And so one of the big things at this time was trying to find a way to make alternating current useful. And that was where Tesla comes into the picture, because Tesla was working on polyphase alternating current induction motor. And the Greek behind a lot of that is that you could take this powerful alternating current and then using oscillating transformers that spin, you can make that energy essentially more stable, and then you could shoot it out at a lower voltage. And so it'd be safer to run through your house, to run through things, and then you can control it as well. And being more powerful means that it could go over further distances. And so whereas Thomas Edison, he could power a block with direct current, this could power a city. But he needed Nikola Tesla to help with this. And so Westinghouse would purchase Tesla's patents for the polyphase AC induction motor. Obviously, it made it safer. And ultimately, the War of the Currents would win in alternating current's favor. And AC would would ultimately power the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. And I do have a little picture of that here, lit up over the water there. Incredible deal. The World's Exposition, the Columbian Exposition, that is, it had a lot of different inventors and innovators there, and it was just this huge, I guess, event full of time and science and all this future stuff there. And the fact that it was powered with AC, that changed the world. And so ultimately, Nikola Tesla and Westinghouse had a good thing going on. Now, unfortunately, there would be a brief recession in the 1890s. The Westinghouse company was afraid it would have to go bankrupt. It was losing money. And so Nikola Tesla had this contract where he was producing, he patented these induction motors as well as these oscillating transformers, and he was making money off of those, his royalties. And unfortunately, Westinghouse would confront Tesla and say, "Listen, my company's gonna go under unless I can stop, this contract to save my company." And Nikola Tesla, he, to his own detriment, he did what he thought was the right thing to do, which was rip up his contract. And he said, "Don't worry, you don't got to pay me anymore." And Tesla really just lost his steady flow of income. And so, unfortunately, after that, Tesla would be out on his own. He no longer had the steady income. And the Westinghouse company would actually make it. They would continue past the recession, but they never really signed Tesla back on to give him that contract. He continued to work and invent. Here we have a picture of that's Nikola Tesla in the back there, and he was working on a remote control boat that he had worked on. He worked on remote control. He worked on a number of different things. And during this time, just like alternating current, Nikola Tesla had his ups and his downs. It was very volatile, and his finances were doing that same thing. He relied on investors, but a lot of this time where he was on his own spent in court cases. He was, a lot of it was over patents and rights because Nikola Tesla was 100% an inventor. That's what I like to say. He's 100% an inventor, whereas Thomas Edison is 50% inventor, 50% businessman. And Thomas Edison made sure to patent every single invention, every single innovation. If they changed where a screw was located on something, Thomas Edison would patent. Nikola Tesla did not. And even when he was working at the telephone exchange in Hungary, they say that he even has said that he worked on a number of innovations there, but he didn't bother patenting those inventions and innovations. He made no money off those. And when he worked for all these companies, when he had to sell patents, unfortunately, he just did not have these patents under his belt. And so he couldn't make money and he couldn't hold up in court cases when someone else saw work similar to his. And so they made essentially the same thing and then patented themselves. And so, unfortunately, he spent a lot of this time on his own, fighting his own battles like that. Here we have a shot of Nikola Tesla sitting there with some Tesla quotes. This is the same shot behind me, this little backdrop. Now, onto Wardenclyffe. So one of the biggest projects Tesla would embark was on his Wardenclyffe Tower. This would be one of 30 towers all over the globe. And the idea was that these towers would wirelessly communicate to broadcast music, news, stock info, and even facsimile images using the Earth as a conductor. And they'd use vibrations as well as using the air above it. But his main idea for the Wardenclyffe Tower was the wireless transmission of energy. And so essentially he realized that if we did a number of work, we'd have to do a lot of work all over the earth to send essentially signals and energy through it's really kind of like plasma up in the sky. It's kind of a stretch and it'd take a long while, but the idea was that he could do that and it would be so easy to send electricity and energy this way that we could even do it for free. We wouldn't even have to charge it. Now, the word free is not a word in many investors' vocabulary. And one of the big people behind this was J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan, one of the wealthiest men, his companies were some of the wealthiest in the world. He was giving Tesla money for this, for the Wardenclyffe Tower. And it's essentially the small structure in front is a building, behind it's the tower. And then he was paid a decent amount of money to essentially create this whole thing. But then he kind of kept pushing the project back and back. He wanted it to be perfect because he was a perfectionist. He wanted to make sure there was, buildings for the workers. There was all this different stuff. Tesla, like I said, not a businessman though, so he wasn't always allocating his funds well, and a lot of times he was using funds he got from investors to pay off debts, other things like that. And he unfortunately just took too long of time on this. When he said that this was going to be free, he started to lose investors then and there. They're like, we don't want to give you this. Tesla said a number of things during this time period that essentially made investors kind of say, maybe we don't want to put our money on that guy. One of those was that when he was working on wireless communication, that he may have gotten a signal from outer space. And once he's talking about that, he's talking to the public about getting signals from aliens. A lot of people are like, this guy's kind of a loony. And so a lot of people will leave. And unfortunately, a big thing about the Wardenclyffe Towers was that they were going to build one in America and they were going to build one across the Atlantic. And that was going to be like the first test was going to be if they could send a signal from one to the other. But at the same time, Marconi and the radio was going on, and Marconi was working on radio waves, and he would actually create a tower across in Europe and one over in I believe it was Greenland, but it could have just been in Canada. And he would send a signal over first, and that signal, the moment he officially sent one, I believe it was the letter S, was what he sent over. The moment they're like signal wirelessly transferred across the globe, a lot of investors turned away from Tesla and went to Marconi, went to other, different aspects of that. And unfortunately, that was when most of the investors would leave. He would kind of lose that race, which, if you look at what Tesla was actually working on, it wasn't exactly radio. He wanted to work on a lot more than that. But unfortunately, just too many people left the project, and the world wasn't ready. And he drove away those investors. After losing the radio race, they actually would destroy the Wardenclyffe Tower. So this is what this picture is here. They would sell it for scrap to help deal with Nikola Tesla's debts. Which, how sad is that? That the reason it's not here today is because someone used it just for the metal inside it, and it was canceled. Ultimately, Tesla's fortunes would only sink from there on after. The rest of his life, he would fight for his patents, and he would suffer from severe debt. Many of his workshops and belongings were liquidated, and this was a guy, he never had a house. He was constantly living in hotel to hotel. Sometimes he would stay at these grand hotels in New York, other times in a lot smaller hotels, even motels. Um, and ultimately, by the end of his life, it was almost in relatively obscurity. Is he would be this recluse that was living by himself, taking his food in his own rooms, um, and unfortunately, he would pass away as well in one of those hotel rooms. He passed away January 7th, 1943. He was 86 years old. It was supposedly a heart attack because he didn't have a family. Uh, all of his belongings and all of the patents he had were just claimed by someone else. The people that went and kind of raided his hotel room, they like would take those boxes and they'd give them to the government. The government and the defense program would get this kind of stuff from Tesla. In total, though, he did have 112 patents under his belt by the time he passed away. Uh, Kind of an ironic is that after he passed, over 2,000 people attended his funeral. And so you can see that a lot of people did care about him, think about him. But really, by the end of his life, he was in obscurity. My boss's favorite story is about how his best friends, really, toward the end of his life, were pigeons. And specifically, there was one pigeon who had a name. It was a girl, and he described her as the only woman in his life. And he would just talk to her on the park bench, this pigeon. And then with that, these are my sources. But I can just end right there. But is of course this is on his life, his work in alternating current, and what we got to know is that without Nikola Tesla's work on alternating current, a lot of the things today would not have been possible. Sure, there were a lot of other inventors at the same time working on very similar things. I like to describe the whole late 1800s, early 1900s as giants on the shoulders of giants, just all these people on top of each other working, giant Venn diagram. But it was his work specifically in our lifetime, maybe not lifetime, but in our timeline, I should say, that made alternating current usable and feasible. And it's why today we power our cities with alternating current. And definitely there has been a large kind of push for Nikola Tesla lately in kind of giving him the honors that he did deserve, considering that he would pass away penniless and in debt when he died. And that's why, as someone working at Edison and Ford, talking about Thomas Edison, I did want to talk about Nikola Tesla because they interacted. They weren't these comic book villains with each other that a lot of a lot of different media shows that they were. After the War of the Currents, they were on relatively good terms, and they did hold each other to respect. But on that note, that is our conversation about Nikola Tesla, his life, work, and alternating current. I do want to tell you guys to join us next Tuesday, November 14th at 10:30 for a very similar presentation, as in a digital one is what I meant, for a digital discussion on the Battle of Olustee, Florida's largest land battle of the Civil War. This will be our very only Holly Schaefer giving this presentation. Please join us. That'll be fun. And on that note, do you guys have any questions? Those of you that are watching, anything in the chat? I really appreciate that you think mine was very rich. I really appreciate that. Any other questions, anyone? All right. Well, if there's not going to be any questions, this will be uploaded to YouTube shortly thereafter. You can always ask us questions in the comments there. But I do want to thank you guys so much for listening. You guys all have a great day. Well, then, have a good one.